Good evening, everybody. This is Archana Malhotra, your host, and I welcome you to our online session, World's Sparky Bar. There are people for whom only ends matter, and then there are people for whom means are as important as the end. What's more important for you? How can a good person really win? The writings of Machiavelli were banned in the 18th century for their devious content. But have they enhanced our knowledge of evil to help the principled person win? Let us find out in our talk today. For everyone, we'll throw open the discussion for questions from you as the session progresses. Do type your questions and send us on the chat. A TEDx speaker, he is the author of critically acclaimed bestsellers like When You Are Sinking, Become a Submarine, commentaries on Chanakya, Confucius, Machiavelli, and Kabir. He has hosted TV programs like Hum Aise Kyun Hain, has written columns for Times of India, Financial Chronicle, and he is the CEO and MD of Bygone India, a French multinational. And we are not done yet. He sits on some of the most respected boards of India and is consulted by many on business and life, including our own Prime Minister. He also shares his learnings for leaders through his 2-minute video series called The Deep Slice. We welcome today Mr. Pawan Chaudhary.
Thank you, Archana. And it's a pleasure to be with you all. I'm glad to see you and so many of our neighbors and even Raghu from Bangalore. Big pleasure, Raghu. And I'm looking enviously at the background which you have. It seems that you have a more spacious home than me, and I'm a little jealous about that. Go ahead.
So, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, invited you to his house on January 1st regarding tips on how to kickstart the economy. Unfortunately, of course, nobody knew what's going to happen. But can you elaborate what happened and how was the meeting?
So, to set this in the right humble context, it was not that he wanted tips, he wanted suggestions. And I was not the only person. There were 6 other people along with me who were invited. And they were all industrialists from the healthcare sector, hospital owners, or pharma company owners. And he wanted to understand what should be the way forward. As you remember, before we entered into COVID, already the economy was a little shaky. So we were kind of entering COVID with a comorbidity. So it was that comorbidity he wanted to address. We did not know COVID is coming, etc. So that was the discussion about it. The meeting lasted for about 2 hours, and it was a very good exchange.
Your company deals in medical equipment. What ails Indian healthcare, if you can elaborate?
Yeah. So there are so many problems with Indian healthcare, but if I was to share one common theme which runs under all those problems, I would say it is the Cobra effect. Cobra effect is a term in economics which comes from colonial India, when in Delhi there were a lot of cobras. So the British government, it decided that we should give an award, we should announce an award for every dead cobra which is brought. So they announced this incentive scheme. And in the beginning it was successful because a lot of people killed cobras to claim the award. However, after some time, Archana, clever Indian businessmen, enterprising startups, they started breeding cobras to bring the killed cobra, the dead cobra, claim the reward. When the government came to know about it, it withdrew the scheme. And when these cobra breeders came to know about the fact that the scheme is withdrawn, they released the cobras. So in the end, there were more cobras after the scheme than before. So Cobra effect refers to unintended adverse consequences of well-intentioned policies which have not been thought through. They are not watertight in their construction. And because of that, because of such policies, there are a lot of cobra effects in the healthcare sector today. So schemes have flopped one after the other, and unintended adverse consequences are drowning the sector.
Totally, very interesting. We would love to elaborate some time on this, but we have to move on. How do pandemics change the socio-economic structure and behavior in any society?
So let me illustrate this. When the Black Death came in Europe, the demographic correction which came by reduction in the population, that actually brought less strain on agriculture. Earlier, agriculture was only for producing grains. Now, agriculture could produce cash crops also. So, prosperity started rising. Plus, the number of slaves or serfs was reduced. So, their bargaining power improved. That is how the socio-economic structure changed. At the time of Spanish flu, doctors were not so brave as nurses in handling the Spanish flu patients. So the nurses' stock rose, and simultaneously the women's suffrage movement was also happening. So the nurses' power rose. That means all this chaos which pandemics bring. Chaos is also a ladder. New tribes ascend on that ladder. In the Black Death case, the new tribe which ascended was the peasant. In Spanish flu, the new tribe which ascended on that ladder was the nurse. So this is how power structure changes. Behavior also changes. Conspicuous consumption after Black Death was reduced. Even the height of the heel of the sandal which a woman could wear was regulated. Also, economics changes, economic behavior changes. For example, after the SARS episode, the SARS upheaval, online shopping behavior increased like anything in China. So, a lot of changes happen because of socio-economic and power structures and behavior changes after pandemics.
And we are going through one now. So what do you foresee the changes? Of course, some of the things we all can predict, but I would like to hear from you as well.
So I feel that some sectors will be, of course, hit badly, like aviation, travel, leisure, oil, automobile. Poultry will be hit badly. Poultry is already hit. We are losing, the poultry industry is losing 200 crores. And poultry and newspapers may be hit because of fake news. That poultry may carry the virus, and newspapers also may be the carrying the virus in them for time, on them for time. Plus, several other sectors will do better. Eventually, healthcare will do better. Right now, healthcare is in a big soup. Then EdTech will do better, gaming will do better, entertainment will do better, telecom will do better. So these are some of the changes which one can anticipate.
True. So, Pawan, you are an entrepreneur, a business coach, author, host, and so on. How do you manage so many different professions together? Different businesses, different things, passions?
So biggest reason for that is the support which I have in my family. So my wife is my publisher also. She is the bouncing board for any ideas which I have. She is also an MS in computer sciences. So I know very little about even the Zoom call works, everything she fixes. So that is a very big support. The second thing is that perhaps my interest, I have been able to align with the growth of my companies. on which with who I work. So I'm interested in the socio-economic grain, the socio-political economic grain of humankind, and the businesses also depend on this. So my interest in this area helps me bring some success for my business also. For example, if I had this opportunity of meeting the Prime Minister, I will surely advance my company's agenda also, and the companies also like that. So there has been no pressure on me to be in the tunnel of the corporate sector and not think of anything else. I could paint on a wider canvas because of my family and because of aligning my interests with my company's final objectives.
Great, I'm sure that helps. I've seen your video, meditation can have side effects. Is it true? It was pretty interesting. It's a, I mean, good point of view, but I would like you to share it.
Well, so what I've said in that video is that too much meditation done for too long in some cases leads to insomnia. Because in meditation, what you do, you drive thoughts away from the mind. But nature has a way of returning them when you are about to sleep. So I have seen that in people who have done too much of meditation without proper guidance, there are instances of insomnia. So I think it is, if meditation helps you or others, it is great. But we should know that we should not depend too much on this, because beyond a particular quantity, even nectar might start working like a poison.
That's true. That I agree with totally, because too much of anything is bad. There has to be a balance.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on fast because there is so much that we can learn from you, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions at the end as well. So, who amongst the three great philosophers, Chanakya, Confucius, and Kabir, is your favorite in the trilogy of wisdom?
So, in this book, I feel Confucius is my favorite because I'm speaking about Confucius's social wisdom. So Confucius goes beyond Aristotle and beyond Buddha. Aristotle and Buddha said that go for the middle path. Neither be a coward nor be reckless, be courageous. Neither be spendthrift nor be miser, be liberal. So middle path. Confucius goes beyond this. Confucius says the wife should listen to the husband, should be obedient to the husband, but the husband should be, he asks this question, tell me, what does he expect the husband to be? He says, wife should listen to the husband and husband should be loyal to the wife, because he knows that wife may start listening to him, but this guy may go here and there. So similarly, he says that the elder brother, the younger brother should be respectful of the elder brother, but the elder brother should be kind and gentle to the younger brother. So what he's doing, he has brought balance in the interpersonal space. He is saying that as long as you are balanced on your own, it does not still lead to a harmonious neighborhood, harmonious society. Relationships also should be balanced and there should be justice in the space between two people, and balance should be there. So he has gone far beyond Buddha and Aristotle, and which is why I feel that if I look at it from this prism, I feel Confucius is my favorite among the three I have spoken about.
Awesome. Your motto for business is sales is vanity, profit is sanity, and collections is reality. What are some of the mistakes most entrepreneurs make? And also, apart from this, I would like to, for you in the current situation, because, entrepreneurs are going to be most hit in the current situation. So I want to, extend it to the current situation as well.
Okay, so in the current situation, I feel an entrepreneur should first of all look after his personal and staff's safety. That means physical safety and economic safety. Then he should look at cash. Then he should look at the supply chain, because supply chains are getting battered. Then he should look at the demand. That demand also should not start faltering. It should not start slumping. And finally, he should look at the ecosystem, including the government, which will help him handle to some extent these problems, including the supply chain, including the safety of the people, etc. So these are 5 things I feel right now a businessman should look at.
We all learn from failures is a very intense and true saying, or even a reality. The way you face the situation or manage to persevere after a failure is very tough though. How would you teach entrepreneurs the importance of failures, or can this actually be taught?
Very good question. I feel we cannot teach people the importance of failure till we celebrate failure. We as a society don't celebrate failure. We celebrate all the rags to riches stories. But have we ever celebrated a riches to rags story who has lost his money for no fault of his? I mean, he did not cheat the government or anything like that. Somebody who lost his money but is still happy in his cottage, though he has come down from the palace to the cottage. Now he is still living a good life. We don't celebrate such failures till we also say that that was a great journey downwards and he has found a new equilibrium even in his cottage. Till then we will not be able to really make people enjoy their failures or even really embrace their failures in the true sense.
Do sometimes families also, of course, unknowingly add on to the pressure of performance, comparisons, desires?
In my view, families very often lead to stress, because what happens is that every family knows some other family which is doing better than them. So comparisons start between brothers, between friends, between brothers-in-laws, and so on. Now, you might be a family which has, let us say, a wealth of 20, 30 crores, 40 crores, which is a decent sum to live a decent life. However, there might be somebody else in the neighborhood or in your friend circle, significant other, who has made 400 crores. Now, the discussion in this house, which has 40 crores, starts having always the ghost of that comparison present. So, this leads to a lot of problems. Many a time, families may be doing this inadvertently, but they are telling the father or the breadwinner, "Daddy, show us one more trick, like that uncle." And the wife also may be doing that unknowingly. So then you stop enjoying your own wealth and your achievements, and you start looking at how you are comparing with that other family you are seeing from a distance. You're getting the edited version, the Facebook version of that family, how happy they are, what nice holidays they are going for, whether they have chartered a plane, and so on. You don't know how many fights happened in that plane. You do not know whether they had to borrow money to rent the plane, etc. But these are problems which we create for ourselves through comparison, and sometimes they become like the leitmotif, the constant background. Anything you do also, you feel, how will they think? Okay, how will you appear in their eyes?
This is so true, actually, for all of us at some point or the other, and we don't realize, but there is so much direct and indirect pressure we get onto ourselves, and especially in times like this. I think we all need to, like, take a step back, introspect, and appreciate what we have. Not only that, but be very aware of this as well, because indirectly it does pressurize you.
Yeah, but the
So
COVID things
first,
like things like COVID are the levelers. Okay, COVID and situations like this level you. Okay, because all of you are now stuck in your homes now, or even the Indian roads, they level you. The Indian polluted air levels you. However, you need to do a little bit of retrospection and try to reach your happy equilibrium and disengage from these ghosts who have come in your home, who you are comparing with and losing sleep.
very true. So we have two questions. Malika and Raghavan are asking you, coming to the current Indian economy, do you think we have the intellectual powerhouse in Delhi to really trigger economic growth? Because we need heavy duty plans.
Frankly, I feel that our intellectuals are not really ready. They are not thorough. I also feel our leaders are not thorough. Margaret Thatcher is a leader I admire. She was a chemist by training. She was called forensic. She really used to like this adjective which was around her, which was given to a forensic lady, because she used to really make a thorough and watertight case. She had a guy called Keith Joseph, who was the head of policy for her. And his only job was to find out what will be the unintended adverse consequences of this policy. That level of work so far was not there. However, I am happy that though I am no fan of any prime minister, but I'm really happy that we have a strong prime minister, which is Narendra Modi, at the helm today. In his second term, where in his first term, many of his policies may have had lot of unintended consequences. However, learning from those, it is possible that he might bring intellectuals who are thorough and who will be able to advance policies which will have enduring long-term advantage. This is a hope. It is not yet a reality.
And we're hoping it will be a reality soon. Mr. Rakesh Khanna is asking you my question. What is your mantra for happiness? What do you think is happiness?
I think happiness is a state of harmony and peace, where all your near and dear ones, your relationships are well oiled. You are getting pleasure from 4 important areas of life. One is work. Your work should be pleasurable and you're getting happiness from it. Second is wealth, so you have enough. Third is love, that is family life, friend circle. And fourth is growth. So some kind of growth should be there in your life. It may be just self-improvement. It need not be climbing the ladder of hierarchy or a ladder of designations. But if these 4 things are in tune. Your work, your health, your wealth, the love and growth. These four, 5 things, if they are in tune, then you are happy. Have I answered your question, Rakesh? Go ahead.
Rakesh ji.
I'm just
Yeah.
putting on the mic.
So,
I think so. Just one other thing.
Go ahead.
This is not true for everybody, is it? It's what should make them happy, but people go in wrong directions and end up being unhappy. Is that true, or do they find happiness there as well?
Yeah, I feel a lot of people are unhappy, and all of us are unhappy sometime or the other. One of the things which makes us unhappy as we grow older is regret. Regret comes from the opportunities which you had and the choices which you made. And so I see regret maybe coming in 5-6 areas: education, it comes in parenting, romance, career, self-improvement, leisure. All these areas can lead to some level of regret, and it can be triggered by anything. You're seeing a TV commercial where a father and son are really enjoying a game together, and there is lot of affection which you see between both of them, and you might feel that maybe I did not give enough time to my kids. So I feel that happiness is something which very few of us can reach always. None of us, I think, and many of us go in the wrong direction. Many of us do not have that sensitive families which we spoke of, who will allow the other person to live and breathe, and also ensure that everybody lives and breathes happily.
true. Also, I feel that happiness is your own state of mind. I mean, it depends on what you feel and how you can elevate your state of mind with at any stage, at any point of time, under any circumstances. And it's a journey, basically.
I
So
agree with you.
uh, we were talking of regrets. What regrets do you have in life?
Mhm. So I think my regrets mostly are psychological in nature or emotional. So some harsh judgments, some relationships scarred from either side. Those are the kind of regrets I have. But I am not really in that in that chronological age where one has a lot of regrets. Okay, I'm getting there, and then I'll see what other regrets I have. Of course, I also have a regret that uh, maybe education wise I should have studied philosophy or political science rather than pharmacy. Though my wife says, then how would we have ensured that the kitchen fires were burning? so but my more of my regrets are in the emotional side. One of the shadows of intelligence, little bit intelligence, is judgment. And judgment is good because it saves you from many dangers. It makes you make the right decision. But judgment of people is not so great. So you have to sift through the judgment which works for you, and uh, and abandon the judgment which might create cracks in your relationship with other people. So I feel those maybe a few harsh judgments which I might have come to earlier uh, are my regrets.
But I guess that's what life is all about, and that's what growing up is all about. And of course,
Absolutely.
we have a long time to go
Yeah.
to learn many more experiences. Okay, well, first I'll ask you 2 questions from here, and then I'll proceed.
Go ahead.
Rohit Bhandari is asking you, is that what happened in the case of Rajat Gupta? Looking at peers' levels of prosperity goaded him to do financial dealings he shouldn't have. This is when we were talking about family pressures.
Yes, yes, could have been. Because same thing happened to Chanda Kochar. Chanda Kochar was very well off, but rather than being happy with your home in World Spa, if you start aspiring for the home in Aurangzeb Road, and you are mostly dealing with people who are in Aurangzeb Road, and nobody is there to tell you that World Spa is good enough, enjoy, okay, then you might uh, start trying to run towards Aurangzeb Road by bending the rules, okay, and when you bend the rules, then there is a chance of you getting caught also. I've read about Rajat Gupta. From the circle which he had, it is possible that what Rohit is saying is a fair estimate of the origin of the mistake.
And I remember Shelley saying, sharing with us that when I spoke to all his friends and family, I mean, nobody was ready to say anything against him. So popular was he with everybody, which is also commendable.
Yeah.
So,
Also, we feel that the rich may be this esoteric class, but a lot of studies have been done on this, and one of the personal study was done by Marcel Proust, who climbed the social ladder in France to reach the highest level, and then he discovered the rich were neither intelligent nor interesting nor honest. Okay, so so many a time those praises which come from that circle also should be discounted. uh, this is what I feel.
So is this something from your book, Modern Machiavelli? I mean, I remember reading a little bit about it. So
No, my book is called Machiavelli for Moral People.
Okay, Maha. So I was forgetting the name.
No
I
problem.
think it should be a very interesting book to read. And but we move on to the next question now. Ajay is asking you what recipe you recommend to Prime Minister to restart the economic growth now.
So, well, basically, what I tried to say was that all the policies which are made should be thorough. I said it in, of course, different words. Let me tell you, the Prime Minister was also very open. He said, अगर कभी बस अटक जाती है तो सिर्फ ड्राइवर की ही रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी नहीं है कि वो धक्का लगाए, आप सबको बस से उतरना पड़ेगा और धक्का लगाना पड़ेगा, लगाओ धक्का. You know, he was in a very humorous mood. So, sensing that mood and sensing his openness, I tried to say that we need to be more thorough. We should pulse the socio-economic grain and then come out with our policies which are in line with this socio-economic grain, rather than imposing templates which will be rejected by the system.
So Sumit Puri is asking, where would you place nurturing the spiritual quotient in the context of happiness, as even reading the Gita or spiritual discussions is looked down upon in most circles? Although the thought process is changing now, but your views.
So there are two types of circles. One is the liberal circle and the other is the conservative circle. The liberal circle looks down on things like the Gita, and their argument is that the society has matured. If you are not driving an ambassador today and you are driving, let us say, a Honda Accord or a BMW, then why do you want to drive a your understanding through a very old text, because humanity has evolved in its behavior as well as its understanding of itself. So this is the liberal argument. And the conservative argument is that, extremely conservative argument is that Gita has the entire world's knowledge in it. I am somewhere in between. I feel Gita should be read, and it is a great treatise. And Radhakrishnan's Gita should be read because it is least adulterated, because we do not know Sanskrit or Hindi that well, or not used to reading Hindi so often. So his Gita should be read. Along with Gita, you should read the Zohar also. You should read the Bible also. You should read later and more contemporary religions also. So the entire spiritual spectrum should be acquainted with before you choose a particular line. And for me, the spiritual quotient earlier came from religion. Now it comes from agnosticism. I feel that I reach a meditative bliss, which is much more natural and sustainable through the space of agnosticism rather than belief or disbelief. Have I answered your question, Sumit?
Yes. And I move on to the last question before I move on to my questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Goyal is asking, what's your thought on how to improve our healthcare system?
So I feel that as far as the men are concerned, we have a lot of problem there. That means skilling is required, vacancies have to be filled. There's a problem called iatrogenic events. Iatrogenic events means those diseases and deaths or disabilities which are caused by doctors or nurses only by mistake. Those also have to be corrected through training. That is about the men's side. Then there is the machine side. So the latest technology should be there, and there should be different levels of hospitals. Some, sorry, which would give you top level of care, and some for the middle and the lower levels also, depending on how much who can afford. Then the third is the money bit. The government has done a great thing by bringing Ayushman Bharat, but the socio-economic and civic divide between the classes is very high. That means when NHS came in Britain, it was successful because before NHS, the World War happened, and that in the bunkers, the rich and the poor, to avoid the bomb shelters, in the bomb shelters, they were together. So their behavioral styles became similar, civic modes of behavior became similar, and they started accepting each other. So when NHS was brought for everybody, it was kind of successful. However, in our case, when we have brought it, the civic behavior divide is very huge. We have to do something about that also, so that the rich are more accommodating of the poor, and the poor are having manners which the rich can digest.
Okay, we move on to the books that you have authored. They are very interesting names. Actually, they are very intriguing names. When You Are Sinking, Become a Submarine, and Machiavelli for Modern People, as you mentioned. What have you focused upon in these books?
So When You're Sinking, Become a Submarine is about how a principled man can defeat an unprincipled man. So usually the unprincipled man in life loses. The real battles, the big battles of life, the unprincipled man wins. The principled man loses. So When You're Sinking, Become a Submarine is a practical guide to tell the principled man how the unprincipled man cheats him and manipulates him and intimidates him, how he should have the antidotes for these moves and how he should build enduring bases of power.
आवाज की पर हम नहीं बोल सकते.
Hello?
Rakesh, can you mute?
So that is,
Yeah, let me try and do that. Yeah.
Done.
We
Yeah,
find
okay.
out who's. Maybe what I'll do is I'll mute everyone because it's difficult to find out. Paul and Pavan and Archana, you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
so that is the, and Machiavelli for moral people is, Machiavelli was an amoral ambassador. He used to say things like, yesterday's promise was yesterday's necessity. Breaking it today is today's necessity. Break it. So he was extremely amoral. So
Reminds me of a big leader, actually.
Reminds me of many. so Machiavelli for moral people is a book which shares what are the really devious games which unprincipled people can play. It is even more advanced than when you're sinking, become a submarine. And it takes its inspiration from a quote from the Bible where Jesus says, "Go like doves into the world, but beware of the serpent." So I have exposed the serpent there so that you can spot the serpent as well as overcome him. That is the purpose of that book, Machiavelli for Moral People. Unless you know how bullets work, you cannot make a bulletproof jacket. So it is the knowledge of the bullets which the devious man uses.
Very, very interesting indeed. Pavan, do you believe in superstitions?
I used to be quite superstitious. I remember this Shiv Murti, when I used to sometimes cross it without doing my namaste, without doing my pranam, I used to then ask my driver to take me back. And then, I could feel that he's half chuckling because he knows that the master is scared and he is going to bow again. I was also superstitious in the karma. So this was not only superstition of omen, also karma. I misbehaved with a servant of mine before leaving for France, first trip to France, many, many years back. And I lost my passport. And all hell broke loose. I finally, with great difficulty, got my passport, a new passport issued. And then I realized that my earlier passport, was lying in a corner of my briefcase. I did not search the briefcase well enough. Because all the time, the fact that I had misbehaved with my servant and retribution is coming was playing in my mind. So even though retribution would not have come, I willed it on myself. That's how superstitious I was. However, when I got exposed to European thinkers, then slowly the superstition is gone. And now I'm nearly in the agnostic space, and I feel that this is a very blissful space. Now I'm not superstitious at all.
But I guess, when you do something wrong, morally or otherwise, it also plays on your mind.
That's why they say you're not punished for your sins. You're punished by your sins. So all those people who have been born and brought up in this karmic understanding, which we Hindus have, they have this self-regulatory, regulating rhythm. In fact, I would call it, there's a word for whipping yourself. I'm forgetting the name. You whip yourself after doing something wrong because so is your indoctrination by karma. But on karma, I will speak to you sometime again because I feel that there is some modification which is required in our understanding of karma, given the light of new research in psychology and human behavior.
Great. So, Rakesh ji is asking you, among the various hats you wear, which is the one that you're most passionate about?
So this is an invisible hat. This hat is the hat of a student. I am, I may be known as a author or counselor or whatever. Nobody knows that I am really a very keen student, or that is not a tag I have, but that is the hat I enjoy most. Being a student, learning about human nature, learning things, thanking the world of knowledge which I have inherited. If it is a staircase of knowledge as that I've inherited, thanking the universe for that, and also trying to add one small step to it, which was so far not present. That knowledge of staircase, I thank, enjoy being there, and also wanting to add a step to it.
James is asking you, the lockdown is saving lives from the spread of the virus, but the economic devastation means we will lose lives as millions fall back into poverty. How do we choose which lives to save?
It's a very difficult. It's a very difficult question to answer. That's a very good question.
Very unfortunate that we have to face these moments.
Yeah. So I will go by what Socrates and Plato have spoken about eugenics. And I do not go by what they have said that the best should survive. The most intelligent, physically good, physically strong people should survive. The best genes should survive. I don't go I don't advise that because they have said it. I advise that because we have had a very checkered past as a country. For the last 2000 years, after the Maurya clan, we have seen only decline and disaster and defeat and ignominy and chaos and dirt. So because of which I would say that the best among us should be chosen for their minds, for the robustness of their bodies, for the wealth they can bring, for their enterprise, and those should be the people who should be chosen.
So we are fast moving towards the aging process. Not that we are on the corner. There's a long time to go. What would you advise all of us?
So you are not anywhere near the aging, let me say, starting line. I am much ahead in the queue than you.
Well, parlors are yet to open in another month, and I'm sure I'll be ahead of many. So,
you know, your age, if it comes, it only comes on the face. Mine, I can feel in the body also. But anyway, I feel as we age, we should maintain utility. Utility of what kind? Maybe it is capital utility. So your kids and people around you are dependent for some monetary support. Or it can be social utility. You can give them connections which are very important in a country like India. Or it can be intellectual utility. You can give them good advice. But as you age, you should maintain utility, because I have seen that people who lose utility completely start getting into some kind of depression, or if not depression, great self-doubt, which is painful. So this is what I would like to say about aging.
very great thoughts. Now, this is my last question. You said there are different metrics to derive pleasure. Would you like to share any? Because especially, these are stressful times, and I'm sure we can all do with a few.
Yeah. So we often associate success with only one metric, which is achievement, money, power. And then our happiness starts depending on this metric. Other metrics or triggers of happiness also should be chosen. For example, gibberish is one. Gibberish, is nonsensical talk, goofy behavior. You would have seen that as kids, we enjoyed even jumping into the puddle, and that also gave us happiness. Through something like gibberish, and I'll come to some other examples, you will notice you are reducing your stress levels. It is not like a sedative, but it is almost like a mild tranquilizer. So similarly, we understand that our fixation with success is more concerned with the heart and mind, thoughts and feelings. We should also enjoy something about the body, maybe a good massage, maybe some good food, maybe even the cold air of the AC or the hot bath. These also should give us some pleasure. So when you have more triggers of happiness, a good joke, some good humor, some ribbing among friends, all this also should give you pleasure and happiness. So you should have multiple triggers of happiness. Have I answered your question?
Absolutely. And I want to leave everybody on a happy note.
Go ahead.
And let me just see if anybody has any last minute questions, and then we will wind up the session. Rakesh ji is saying, well, okay, it's a serious question, but we'll take it nevertheless. Rakesh ji is asking you, India will be in the world order. Where do you think is India going to be in the world order post the pandemic?
In my view, if we handle the economy as well as geopolitics well, which I feel Modi might be able to do in his second term because of the mistakes which he has made in the first term and the learnings from those mistakes, then I feel we should be among the top 4 or 5 nations of the world in the next decade or 2 decades. This is my estimate. Also, you can also call it, it may be my wishful thinking, but I have seen that many countries after pandemics or big upheavals rose very sharply, and I hope that happens for India also. We have been waiting for last 2000 years.